All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reserve Seating. We have a very special guest this week, Mr. Dana Buckler. How you doing, Dana?
I'm good, Adam. Rob, thanks for having me back. I always love being on reserve seating, so thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We had a fun time last year talking about our favorite movies from the year that we turned 23 to ring in 2023. So for 2024, we're back at it again, but we're talking about the movies that were our favorites from the year that we turned 24 years old.
This is Dana. This is your slot now. By the way, this is every year you will have to join us on this for this show. That's the rule.
I'm excited. I'm all in. I love
All right,
that.
that's good.
You are our January buddy, our winter friend.
Yes.
We started last year by going in chronological order, so I think it only seems appropriate to do so because we're talking about a movie for Dana's pick that I think can be followed by our two other features,
Yes.
and I'm chomping at the bit to talk about it. So
Yes.
we need to talk about it first. Dana, why don't you tell everybody what your pick is for your favorite
Okay.
movie from the year you turned 24?
Okay, so just to be clear, the year I turned 24 was 2002. And when I was given the assignment of figuring out what my favorite movie from that year was, I kind of just did like a broad search of, the movies that came out in 2002. And I got to be honest with you, 99% of them were not jumping out to me like, oh, yeah, I remember loving this film. And it's important that I note that on last year's reserve seating, I selected a movie which is considered to be a classic. It starred Denzel Washington. It was Training Day. He
Hmm?
won an Academy Award for that performance. And I would love to say that I'm going to follow that up 1 year later with a movie of that caliber. But unfortunately, I will not be following that up with a movie of that caliber. I really sort of hemmed and hawed over this for a little bit, and I remember telling you guys, "Oh, I'll have my movie for you in a couple hours."
Hmm.
Several days later, I got back to you and said, "I'm really struggling with this, but if I'm looking at which movie I watched the most in 2002 and which movie I couldn't get enough of, it was Pool Hall Junkies."
Yes.
Okay. The Mars Callahan written, directed, starred classic pool hustling movie. This is arguably one of the worst movies of the decade, and I love it. I can't get enough of this. And this is one of those rare films that is what we call like a video store gem. So in
Hmm.
2002, there's no streaming, there's no YouTube. You found this movie in the video store because it only made $500,000 in the theater. And so I remember renting this from a Blockbuster with my buddies, and we watched it, and we all love playing pool. We're all terrible at playing pool, but we loved it. And okay, so the basic plot of the film is our hero, Johnny, is a pool hustler.
Hmm.
Enough said. That's all you
You,
need to know
you
about the
know that
movie.
because in the film he wears a shirt that says Hustler
He
across the
does,
front.
he
Yeah.
does. But
Yeah.
listen, here's an interesting thing, all right? This movie clearly made outside of the Hollywood, arena. This is an independently financed film. It has Chaz Palminteri, okay? It has Rod Steiger. It has Christopher Walken in it, Michael Rosenbaum. I mean, these are names,
Yeah.
and I'm endlessly fascinated by the behind the scenes of this movie more than I am just the movie. Like, how did this guy get this film made? That's the question I always want to ask you.
This if ever there was a movie that needed a season of Project Greenlight, it is Cool Hall Junkies. Um, I This is only a movie that could have existed at the time that it existed because it was coming off of uh, it. Unless it's a remarkable coincidence, Mars Callahan seems like he's doing John Cusack playing Ben Affleck in like
Yeah.
if he
Yep.
were in Rounders.
Yep.
Like it's so deliberately like him kind of taking on affectations of popular actors of the time. Um, I, and also it's just like maybe this cast just kind of hits their wagon because they're just like you never know. Like these
Yeah.
indie guys, you never know.
Right.
Like Pool is kind of a macho subject and kind of hustling and gambling and things like that. So it's easy maybe to attract like a lot of actors who think like, this could really work. I think the movie works remarkably well towing a line between being the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen and being very involving and very entertaining.
Mhm.
Although for every smart decision it makes two really horrendously bad decisions, especially with Mars Callahan's group of friends, which is like a first draft rewrite
It's
thing
got
that should have happened.
it's got I watched Clerks last night written all
Yeah.
over it. Like
Yeah.
just so it's so screenplay. It's so the 90s screenplay.
I have seen another Mars Callahan movie. He did a follow up called What Love Is.
I was gonna ask you about this.
Jesus Christ, sorry. Holy cow, is that movie? It's like it had to have been like a 600-page screenplay. Like it is all monologue, and it
Wow.
is like the most defending the caveman
Right.
mindset that you could ever see. The sexual politics of that movie are very weird and troubling. But it makes Pool Hall Junkies better because you're just like, wow, it all came together in Pool Hall Junkies. And also, like, I think there's some kind of like a rooting interest that I have with Mars Callahan because he's going up against Rick Schroeder at the end.
Yeah.
And that it just gives me like, okay, he's a douchebag, but he's my douchebag, right?
I mean, it is a movie that could only have existed at this particular time. I mean, this is 2002. This is the tail end of this sort
Yeah.
of, Rounders by way of Chasing Amy, by way of Boondock Saints, by way, you know what I mean? Just like
Yeah.
it's such a specific kind of movie. Like if I had to really kind of explain what independent film of the late 90s, early to what it felt like. I mean, I feel like Pool Hall Junkies is such an exemplary in every meaning of that word. Like example of that. I mean, really do. And I mean that in both a backhanded way, because it's
Mhm.
got all of the pitfalls as we've alluded to, but also just there is just an energy to it that just is 1999 to 2002 an indie film.
Yeah, this isn't the last time I will watch this movie. It it has the it's a great pick for your favorite movie when you're
Oh,
24 because anytime you watch it, it makes you 24 years old again. Like
yes.
you feel like you're 24 years old all over. And yeah, it's just so like needlessly confident. It's
Yeah,
fascinating.
exactly. It's hopelessly confident.
Yeah.
Hopelessly confident. Yeah.
Uh,
There's something just kind of if we're talking about formulas for movies, it's weird that this works so often and it's sort of embarrassing that it works so often, but the I'm awesome, but I lost my confidence that I'm awesome, so I need to become awesome again thing. It almost always works. I don't know to a
I
certain
got it.
extent.
I
It's
got I
weird.
got I got a hot, smart girlfriend in a penthouse apartment. I'm wearing a long sleeve t-shirt under my short sleeve t-shirt. Like I'm a cool pool hall guy. Like it's just I wrote an article a while back about sort of the value of like, the garden states and so on. And this falls right into that where it's like I don't know if it's a guy thing. I don't want to stereotype in that way, but like we all need a pool hall junkies in our early 20s to just get us over that hump to whatever the next phase of our adulthood is. And I had a great time watching it.
Okay, so my pick for my favorite movie from the year I turned 24 was 2006's Casino Royale. I went back and forth between this and Martin Scorsese's The Departed. In 2006, The Departed was my favorite movie of that year, with Casino Royale at number two. But I've watched Casino Royale far more times, and I find it more rewatchable. And it just always is great. Not saying that The Departed isn't, but this is my favorite Bond movie. This is the movie that really crystallized loving James Bond as a property, where I think that I came to the Bond series with License to Kill, and then I saw all of the Brosnan movies in theaters, and none of them like connected for me. So like during my high school formative days, where all my friends were like getting together to play GoldenEye on N64 and stuff like that, I was just kind of like faking being as
Yeah.
enthusiastic about Bond as they were. But when it came to Casino Royale, like it was genuine enthusiasm, and I just loved that the movie was afforded the opportunity because Die Another Day was so bad. Um, of going back to basics, making it about the character. It's not just about the archetype. You care about him as a person. He's got rough edges, but that almost makes him more likable. I think Eva Green is my favorite Bond girl. She's incredible in this movie. I love that the movie's centerpieces are so much more about um, being intelligent and about outsmarting and outwitting your opponents, but that still is not to say that the action sequences aren't spectacular. I can't think of an action sequence that's better than like the opening parkour chase. Nothing gets me more excited about Bond than Casino Royale. I almost think this movie's so good that it like hurts the rest of the Craig series in a way
Mhm.
because it never lived back up to that standard again. If I want to watch a Bond movie, I've seen maybe like 15 of the 25 or so that are been out there. Most of my gaps are like the Roger Moore ones, but it's really Casino Royale and like a couple of the Connery ones. Like those, I keep returning to those as opposed to like going and watching the ones that I've missed. It's just because those are my Bonds. Those are the ones that feel great to me when I'm in the mood to watch a Bond movie.
I'm just going to say right now, I saw GoldenEye in the theater, 95. Didn't
Mhm.
see the other Pierce Brosnan ones in the theater. Um, Casino Royale is the textbook definition on how you reboot a franchise. And
Yeah.
I mean that in the best possible way. And I'm somebody who's tired of reboots and remakes and all of that stuff. But that being said, Bond is its own thing. It's been going for 60 years.
Mhm.
Something you said really resonates with me, and that is, I think there are the Daniel Craig movies here, and then Casino Royale is up here. I
Yeah.
think it is hands down the most, arguably a top three James Bond film of all time.
Yes.
And it's certainly the best of the Daniel Craig movies. By the time we get to No Time to Die, which is what clocks in at almost 3 hours,
Yeah.
I was kind of done with it. But I rewatched Casino Royale. That opening scene is probably, from a stunt wise, one of the most spectacular scenes in any movie, let alone, a James Bond cold open. And I find it interesting that, we're talking about rounders, and one of the most pivotal scenes in the film
Mhm.
has to do with Texas Hold'em, and that was still when Hold'em was a big thing. But that entire sequence is incredibly suspenseful. A card game is suspenseful. So,
It's a
uh, I,
it's a poker game that takes the better part of an hour, and yet it
yeah,
manages to be cinematic.
Casino Royale is just playing on a different level than most other James Bond films. I haven't seen it in probably 3 or 4 years,
Mhm.
but when I rewatched it this week, I was just like, this is a movie. And I mean
Yeah.
that in the best way. I'm not trying to be like facetious. Like, it is a movie. It is an excellent recommendation, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. So thank you for recommending that film.
Yeah, it's just a movie I like to like luxuriate in. Like it's the type of thing where you're like, I've got a whole morning or a whole afternoon. I'm just gonna like kick back and just like really unwind and watch this play out in a very kind of, and it's not to say that the pacing is pokey or anything like that, because the movie moves really well, but it's just not in a rush. And that's something that's really great about it.
So I'll just say real quick. I feel like I'm probably, judging by what you both said, I feel like I'm probably the one maybe most invested in Bond in general,
Mhm.
because the James Bond movies were incredibly important part of my cinematic upbringing way before Casino Royale.
Yeah.
I was a GoldenEye kid. I was completely age appropriate for that. And then even though I played the GoldenEye game, um, I also then became very invested in the films. I had relatives. I'll remember, like talked about owning VHS tapes, and some of the only bought off the shelf VHS tapes that I owned, because so many came from my grandfather's video store, were Bond movies. And so I remember having GoldenEye. I'm actually a huge World Is Not Enough fan. I think that movie is sorely underrated. I love that one. And I do remember though getting into the Bond series, 2002. I'm a sophomore in high school, and it was super embarrassing. That was the double whammy year of Die Another Day and Attack of the Clones. So it was like Star Wars and James Bond, two things I love, put out entries that at the time were considered really just the low point. Um, And so I'm in college when 2006 when Casino Royale comes out, and at that point I'm following the Bond news, I'm following the whole James Bond controversy and all that stuff with Daniel Craig being cast. Um, it did mean a lot to me though. It was a huge deal for me that they were rebooting the franchise. I read the book to get ready for the movie. I was very nervous about. I liked Layer Cake, but I was also like very nervous about this whole new
Hmm?
like taking them back to basis thing. It was just a huge. It was such a huge part of my life, and I remember the evening that we went to see this. I don't know if my friend Vito is watching this, but if you're watching this, my friend Vito remembers. We both worked for UPS at night, and we took off at our when our shift ended at 10 o'clock, and we came peeling out of the airport area where the UPS, our local UPS is, and we were pulled over. We got pulled over, and rightfully so. I was speeding, absolutely. And I remember we were slightly late for the beginning of the film. Like we were coming in just as the MGM logos were coming up, and it was like we were completely nerve wracked that we were going to miss it. But then we sat down, got in our seats, and I'll never forget. Like again, I don't have memories like this, like a lot of folks do, but I'll never forget the black and white coming up, and just sitting and looking up and seeing what they were doing with it. That it was calm, it was collected, it was interesting, it was insightful. It was there was just so many things about it that were so. And I remember coming out of that movie and feeling like the thing that I love is now legitimately cool again.
If it wasn't just Die Another Day, I mean, like you're also conflating that with like 5 years of Austin Powers,
Right, exactly.
Triple X. I mean, like
Born
the
Identity.
cool factor of James Bond was gone,
Yeah,
and Daniel
100%.
Craig brought it back in the matter of a day.
Yeah.
It was incredible. I still remember Friday night, the opening night of Casino Royale. I chose to see Fast Food Nation because I was like, well, that will be out of theaters soon. And as I watched Fast Food Nation, I was like, I should have saw Casino Royale.
So mine is from 2010, and that is David Fincher's The Social Network, which is a movie that I remember. I was such an Aaron Sorkin kid because I loved The West Wing when I was growing up and stuff like that. And I remember reading the log line that was like, Aaron Sorkin is writing a movie about Facebook directed by David Fincher.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Sold.
but also just like what
What would that be?
the seven guy is making the Facebook movie, like what
Yeah.
what is this, like this is so. And I went in so just like looking forward to it, but also just incredibly skeptical and sort of just kind of like ready to sit back and like, what is this going to be? And it became a movie. I think next to Zodiac, I think it's Fincher's best film. The soundtrack is just it's ridiculous. The performances are incredible. I teach this film. This is the centerpiece of my film class because I think it's an example of almost everything good that works in movie making. It doesn't matter that none of it is true. Like it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like it's not meant to be a realistic accounting of the actual Mark Zuckerberg and what happened. The broad strokes of it are accurate, but these are characters, and frankly, to me, that's how I think we should be doing more of our biopics. I like the Priscilla approach. I like the Spencer approach. I like the Social Network approach, which is like it doesn't have to be exactly the Wikipedia article of the person's life. Make it an interesting story set within the sort of broad bounds of a true story.
This was the first time I watched it in a while. I don't know why, but it's just David Fincher movies aren't ones that I return to a whole
Sure.
lot, but
There are a lot.
I like a lot of them. I think this is one of my favorites of his. But the things that I really picked up on this time was, as you mentioned, the score by like Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. It like sounds like a machine learning.
It's just so indicative of like so many wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things about specifically about the storytelling method of this movie, which is this combination of like Fincher's exacting filmmaking, Sorkin's like just the music of his writing, which I know a lot of people are obnoxious. I'm still a Sorkin defender. I don't know. I don't care. I think he's a brilliant writer. Um, and I think that it's just, I can't believe that those two egomaniacs actually managed to get something like this to work.
Yeah.
And it's a miracle. This movie's a
Yeah.
miracle.
I had a few quick things to mention before I forget. The I I don't think the Sorkin screenplay gets enough credit because on this opportunity, like at the time, it was just like, oh, it's the dialogue, but it's not just the dialogue. It's
Ah,
like the structure of this movie is incredible. And it's a 2 hour movie that feels like it's got the material of a 4 hour movie, but it feels like an hour while you're watching it. And it just the flow of it and the editing is great too. And then um I've heard like just somebody say like you can tell if a movie has a bad screenplay because if the movie drags, it means that it's a screenplay problem. And like this is obviously the exact opposite of that. But also, this is the first time I've seen the movie since we know what we know about Justin Timberlake and we know what we know about Armie Hammer, and it kind of like
sure. Yeah.
it doesn't make the movie worse. It just makes it better in a different way.
Yeah.
It's
Well, it's one of those things where, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about the fact that I'll be 46 years old this year,
mhm,
and how interesting it is to watch a period piece movie from a time period that you were well into your adult
Vividly
years
remember.
and
yeah.
vividly remember it from the first time somebody introduced me to MySpace to the flow of Facebook. So on that level right there, I find it profoundly interesting. Um, Also, arguably, I mean, I accept a second a lot of what both of you said. It is an incredible film, but it's also a movie that I know Fincher and Sorkin would probably never do it. But if there was ever a sequel needed to a movie,
Yeah.
it's this one. It's this one because this is 14 years ago, and I mean, it has drastically changed the social media landscape. And I would love to see the commentary from Sorkin and Fincher to see where things have progressed. Listen, a boy can dream. It'll
Sure.
probably never happen, but I find it profoundly interesting and one of the best movies of the past 20 years. Like it's incredible. And I do want to be the guy who will admit I didn't know who Armie Hammer was, and I didn't realize until after I saw the movie that
Yeah.
he was playing both Winklevoss twins.
Michael Vice.
And
Yeah.
and to
Mhm.
me that's a filmmaking decision that still makes me go, huh?
Hmm.
Like
Right.
you made this conscious choice to add such a workload to the production of this film. And you look at the movie and you say to yourself, it doesn't really need that. He could have hired twins or there could have been, more CGI, but like that in itself is such a filmmaking achievement.
I would almost like to see not a narrative sequel. I want to see like a Hearts of Darkness where they talk about the making of the movie, but then they have like current interviews where they talk about current state, social media, Facebook, how we interact with one another. Like, I think that would be really fascinating.
All
This
right.
was great. Thank you very much, Dana, for joining us.
Absolutely.
Before we get going, could you tell our audience where they can find your podcast and where else they can find you on the internet?
Sure, sure, absolutely. So I host the Dana Buckler Show, which is a podcast all about movies in the film industry. I just celebrated 10 years back in November, and Adam, you and Patrick were gracious enough to join me on the 10-year anniversary episode. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
The podcast is available wherever you find, whatever major podcast platform, Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music. I'd like to point out that I just recently had John Travolta on the show talking about The Shepherd. I've
Absolutely.
had Matt Singer, the author of Opposable Thumbs, the how Siskel and Ebert changed films forever. So I've been had an opportunity to interview some really interesting people as of lately. So as far as my, I'm sitting there going, well, if I didn't have a podcast I wouldn't be on social media. But since I am on social media, you can find me on X at Dana Buckler Show, and you can find me on Instagram at the Dana Buckler.
Make sure you tell John Travolta every time you talk to him that Adam says hi.
Yeah.
I do. I do.
Good.
And I did give you credit to both Nicholas Maggio and John Travolta that you were the one that turned me on to Mobland. I just want you to know that. That was
Uh, I know you would have found it eventually anyway, but thank you for doing that. That movie's fantastic. If those of you watching this haven't heard, I put that on my top 10 list for the year. Mobland by Nicholas Maggio is a great, great movie. So thank you very much. We will be back next week with a same title showdown, a show that I'm excited for because I know how excited Rob is for it. We're talking about Twilight 2008 versus Twilight 1998. and we're going to have special guest Leo Brady with us. So until next time.
These seats have a royal flush. Right? That's what he had, right? That's how he.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah.